everybody, and welcome to the I Rock Knits podcast. My name is Corey Eichelberger, and this is episode 24. I have a lot to talk to you about today, and I think we're going to have a special guest. So let's get going as quickly as we can, right? I had 51 viewers reach out to me last week just to have a little chat, and so let's say hello to those people. Charlene Richards, Angela Riney, Janet Roberson, Rerec M, Pat Howes, Gwen Gaither, Cindy Haub, Penny Gilbert, Melinda Zeccardi Russo, Debbie M, Lisa Smith, Sharon Noonan, Olivia Manke, betternpopcorn, M Warden, Maggie's Grace, Peggy Bork, Melissa Brown, Diane Scott, Amy Mikelson, Christa Osborne, Andrea Ribera, Yarn Fashionista, and she has a podcast that I went over and checked out. I can't believe she's podcasting. She has like a little tiny baby and like a toddler, so good on you. It takes up so much time, I'm surprised you're even upright. Julie Moloney, Deb VanDerMolen, Jackie May, Glenda Bathgate, Helen Paxford, Beraria, Beverly Fouth, Amber Keller, Rita Wood, Whit Adder 1, Amy Blandford, Marty Mullen, Susan Katz, Carol Morrison, Jennifer Page, Eileen Tomorrow, and then my first name friends, or friends I know in real life or have met. Barb, Angela, Irene, Emma, Beverly, Melanie, Mary B, Kelly, PJ, Taylor SD, PJ Knits, Fernie, Michelle, Lee Gifford, hi Lee, I haven't said hello to you before on the podcast, I don't think, Kathy Goodman, and Carla. So let's get going today. You can find me as I Rock Knits everywhere on the internet, Instagram, Ravelry. My Ravelry group is called I Rock Knits Designs, and I had someone reach out that they couldn't find it last week. So if you go to your homepage of Ravelry and scroll down by clicking the top button and getting a drop-down menu, you go down to groups, and then a groups page will come up, and over on the right-hand side there's a search bar, and you just type in I Rock Knits Designs, and my group will come up for you. So I just wanted to put that out there, that if you have been unable to find the group, maybe you're putting in, if you're spelling I Rock Knits incorrectly, so it's IROC, so my first name spelled backwards, and then 1K, KNITS. So it's not I Rock and then knits, it's I Rock Knits. So you only have 1K in there. The I Rock Knits Designs Cal is going on for July and August. You can feel free to put any finished objects in there that you knit using an I Rock Knits Designs pattern. So you can win $25 Etsy gift card. I don't think there are a lot of entries in. Knitting goes down for a lot of people in the summertime, so maybe you'd like to cast on one of my hats for a present for Christmas, or get some on the needles for the fall. My chimney hat is a good one to get started here in July. If you're doing Christmas in July, you could make that chimney hat and get it going for December. So that'd be kind of fun. All right, so I did that. Now, someone reached out this week and asked me if my new website would have a donate button, and I'm not sure about that. I haven't really thought that far ahead about having a donate button, but there are several ways that you can support me, and this is what I told her. You can buy a pattern, or you could gift a pattern. So we collect yarn, right? We collect bags. And you can also collect patterns, even if you don't necessarily want to knit them right away. You could purchase one of my patterns to support me, or you could gift it to a friend. So you can go and send it as a gift. Ravelry does that for you. You just put it in the, click on the little button over on the right-hand side when you're checking out, and it will also tell you if that person already owns that pattern. So you won't gift something that they already own. So that would be a great way to support me. I had a question this week from Pat, and it's just kind of a quick one, so I thought I'd answer it right up front here. Pat asked me if I go down a needle size on my ribbing when I'm knitting a sweater, and my answer is no, I don't. I think it used to be very common to go down 2 needle sizes, so you would rib on a 3 and go up to a 5, rib on a 4, go up to a 6. at the bottom of a sweater, but I think styles have changed dramatically, and so the bottom ribbing of your sweater is probably not something that you want to draw in as much. We don't wear them kind of drawn in and then bloused over on top. We would prefer them probably to hang more straight, and so I don't change the needle size. If I'm worried about the ribbing being too loose for some reason, I might go down one needle size, or if you're a loose ribber, like if you just knit loosely, maybe that would be a reason to go down one size, but otherwise I don't usually go down for any of the ribbing that I do. Maybe on a neckline if I'm trying to draw it up a little. Today I'm wearing my cropped cotton cardie, the very first version that I ever knit, where I held all the different cottons double. It gets brighter toward the bottom, so there you go. I just striped it all the way down. That's the one I'm going to be rewriting and adding sizes to, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I'll get that finished up. I'm actually going to knit another one, so it takes probably a weekend to knit something in a bulky weight yarn like this. Oh, here's a little note I wrote to myself. I was out on Instagram the other day, and I noticed that someone had posted a picture of themselves watching the podcast, and was that ever fun to see what you're knitting while you're watching? So if you're knitting right now while you're watching me this week, take a picture of, I don't have to be in the picture, but take a picture of what you're knitting and post it on Instagram and tag me in it so that I can see maybe what you're working on while I'm, taking up an hour of your week every other week. So that could be kind of a fun thing for me. First, let's talk about the audiobooks of the week. There weren't a lot of new posts in that audiobooks thread, so I don't know if people are busier in the summer, so they're not reading or listening as often as they do in the winter months, but I did finish the book, The Sharper Your Knife, The Less You Cry. I think I talked about that briefly on the last podcast, but that was about by Kathleen Flynn, who was a journalist who went to the French cooking school and her journey there, and so that one was quite good. I really enjoyed it. She has one more, what is it called? Kitchen Counter Cooking School, I think, that I bought, so I'll get that on my list to read. But I was kind of in the mood for something. I thought it was going to be light. Not a rom-com or a, what they call chick lit or anything like that, but this one just spoke to me this week. It's called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. And it is a woman who's a psychotherapist. She went to medical school. She talks about her journey. She was really a writer in Hollywood, wrote for a lot of major television shows and things like that, and thought that writing was going to be her career, and then decided that medical school was really something she was interested in. So then she went and worked in an emergency room for a while, or helped in an emergency, kind of to see what that would be like. She kind of shadowed a doctor, and then she decided to go to medical school thinking she would go into like medicine, like doctoring. I'm not saying this very well, but anyway, then she decides to go and become a psychiatrist. And it is about her journey, her getting therapy, her giving therapy, and kind of how that works. So she talks about clients she has, and then she talks about herself in therapy, and it's really funny, very touching, and a little bit sad. I have been in therapy before, and I highly recommend it for any of you who have needed to work through something before. I don't know if this is a good time to share this or not. You guys have been with me for 20 episodes, but I was diagnosed with depression when I was 29, and I had suffered for years, but I was also diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 2. And that can sound really scary to a lot of you, because I think you think bipolar as being a person who can really go off the deep end, and I've never had that. What I have had is small bits of time with mania, And I remember having it as a child, and of course I grew up in the 60s, so it was not very common for people to even know that that could be a disorder for children. But I remember my mind racing, and I'd be in my bedroom and I'd pick up all my toys really, really fast, and I could move around for periods of time, and a day where I thought that everything I was doing, I was moving really fast. And I would say to my mom, "Look at me go," and she would have no idea that what I was experiencing wasn't normal. So I've taken medication for years, and I've worked in therapy, which therapy can be really hard. It can be really, really challenging, but it can also be very eye-opening. And I think the biggest stigma around mental health in our society today is, being out loud about it, but also the availability and how hard it is when you're in a bad place to advocate for yourself and to step up and to make a phone call, and then to not receive an answer on the other end that is helpful or that can schedule you or that takes your insurance. And then you have to get up the energy and the faith in yourself to make another phone call, and how hard it is if you don't have someone there advocating for you or helping you with that process, or saying, you've been really down for a long time, and maybe it would be a good time to talk to someone about your medication, or just having a chat with someone. So I thought that reading a book like this, where she's talking about both sides, herself in therapy and treating clients, of course it's all confidential, and I think she's glommed a bunch of different people together into a couple of characters in the book, can really be helpful in thinking about how you process the world as you view it. I'm really fortunate now to know that, well, not fortunate, what I'm going to say next is not fortunate, but to know that my mom has depression, my grandfather had depression, my nephew has anxiety, my daughter has anxiety, people in our everyday lives that I know well have anxiety and depression and have been treated, and I think I'm more aware of that because I speak openly about it. I share it. I tell people in my knitting group, they all know, right? I've been knitting with them for 14 years, so why wouldn't I share that piece of me? And I often joke, which is probably not a joking matter either, that mania is really fun. It can be really good, right? Remember having an episode many years ago where I was teaching and I was coaching and I was doing all these things, and I just really didn't need to sleep. I could just get all this stuff done. I could get all this work done. It's the downside of that can really be a struggle. And mania can be non-productive too. I mean, you can do a lot of crazy stuff, and I never did. And I've only had a couple of episodes as an adult, which is why one doctor said I wouldn't necessarily diagnose you that way, because you haven't shown a consistent pattern. So, that's hard too, when you just barely tip the scales on maybe having a mental health breakdown, or you've only been depressed for a short period of time, like it's not long for you. Anyway, I didn't really mean to go off on that, but if you are someone who is struggling or suffering right now, please reach out to someone. I'm going to encourage you to make a phone call today to a friend, to a relative, to a child, to a parent, to someone that you love, and tell them, so that they can help you, stand with you, be beside you, or make a phone call to a helpline or to a therapist to make an appointment. Because once the appointment is there, that it makes it so much easier then. All you have to do is get yourself there, which can be really hard. I know. I mean, we call it the deep dark place at my house. We've been there, we've seen it, and I just need to kind of raise my hand and wave it and say, I'm headed there, or I'm there, or I'm feeling like I'm going there. And so, gosh, I'm getting a little choked up today, but I know that a lot of you know what I'm talking about. You have people in your family, or friends, or relatives, or children who suffer. And it can be really, really hard, icky place to be. So there you go. my little PSA for today. If you need to talk to me about a resource, I can't become your therapist, but I would love to just encourage you. So if you need encouragement, I could do that for you. I could encourage you to reach out and try. And boy, it's really hard if you don't get a good therapist too, right? If the first one or the second one aren't a good fit, it's really easy to give up with that too. Okay, enough of that. I'll move on. So maybe you should talk to someone. I'm just finishing it up. I'm in the last hour or so. I've really appreciated the way that she's taken an honest look at herself and something that she's going through in this book, and the therapy that she offers, as well as the therapy that she's going through. I don't even know, do they rate it as a certain type of book? I don't think they do. It's called personal memoir. There you go. That's what I would call it. It definitely is a memoir. And she's not making light of mental health, but some of the things that her patients do are a little crazy, right? And we can all laugh at crazy things we've done before. I have 2 other tips for you today that I found on the internet. So let's talk about those, okay? The first one is, if you are a sock knitter, which I haven't really talked a lot about socks on the podcast. Maybe I'll do a sock talk podcast. I've knit 100 pair of socks. I have an entire bin full. My daughter wears hand knit socks. My husband wears hand knit socks. They wear them more often than I do. I am not a huge fan of a sock without a lot of elasticity, and so they're not always the most comfortable for me. I have very flat feet. And so fit was an issue for me for the first few years, but I have lots of socks that I could show. Patterned socks, colored socks, striped socks. So that would be something that I could show. But Savvy Skeins reposted this, I think, or it was from Savvy Skeins, and the Autumn Acorn reposted it on Instagram. But the measurement from your wrist to the tip of your middle finger, so from your wrist up to the tip of your middle finger, see how they laid the tape measure there, is the exact measurement you need before you start your heel, if you're doing a toe-up sock. So you can just take the sock and lay it from here to here. That is the length, the exact measurement that you need. So screenshot it, take a picture of it, go on Instagram, go to Savvy Skeins, or the Autumn Acorn reposted it. Take a picture of it and keep it in your phone, or just jot yourself down a little note. I used to do that every time I used to watch podcasts. Somebody said something smart, right? Been watching podcasts for probably 10 years, and I have notes and notes and notes from just little tips and tricks that we see. And then Hunter Hammerson posted an interesting tip this week about how to keep yarn from tangling when you're taking it from both ends of a cake. And her answer was, the trick seems to flip the cake upside down when you change rows. When you're working from the inside end, make sure the part of the cake that has the yarn coming out of the middle is facing up when you're working from the inside. The cake center is up. When you're working from the outside, make sure the part of the cake that has the yarn coming out of the middle is facing down, which makes total sense, right? So when you're going around the outside, you do not want that middle piece of yarn pulling up so that it can wrap around it. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, I'll grab a skein here if I can to help with this. So if I'm grabbing from the outside of the skein, I want this part that's coming out of my center to be on the bottom. So then I grab here, and this is just going around the outside. And see, there's nothing in the center coming up to tangle on. But then, if I'm going to go with my next skein, I'm alternating with one skein of yarn, then I would flip it over when I was going to take out of the center, and I would leave this side up, and I could pull it out. And then when I went on my next row to do the outside, and I don't do this very often where I'm taking from the middle and the end at the same time while alternating skeins. I would just normally wind this into 2 cakes, because then they're separate, but sometimes it happens, right? And I thought, look, the light bulb kind of went on for me this weekend when I saw that. I was like, oh, I'm going to print that out from Hunter Hammerson, and it just says the trick. And she has a purple and blue skein, a picture of a purple and blue skein on the screen, so you can go take a look at that. Okay, I have a question to answer from someone who asked about how I can tell the difference between self-striping and variegated yarn. And I answered briefly that it's really hard sometimes. Sometimes you can't tell by looking at the skein if it's variegated or if it's self-striping, but sometimes you can. And this article, How to Dye Self-Striping Yarn, that I found, to illustrate the point. It's by fiberartsy.com, and I'll link it in the show notes. Oh, here's a sheet of paper I was looking for the other day stapled to the back of this. She talks about the definition according to crochetabout.com is self-striping yarn is a type of variegated yarn which has 2 or more colors. Often there are long links of each color before the color changes to the next. When you crochet or knit with self-striping yarn, the yarn will typically create a striped project on its own without the crafting having to do any of the color changes. And she goes through, she has a great tutorial on how self-striping yarn can be dyed at home, and she's got hooks on a door where she does it, and she shows all the steps of the process, and then she's got pictures. So why is self-striping yarn so different to dye? And she says the main difference is the need for long color runs. So this is how you can kind of tell. When you're looking at a yarn like this, where you go, and I've showed this yarn last time, right into another color for short little repeats like this. If you can see that on the outside of the skein, that's not going to be a self-striping yarn, because there's not enough of the yarn to go around like the leg of a sock twice to fit in there, or the circumference of a hat a number of times. So I'm talking about self-striping that is probably 3 to 5 to 6 to 8 stripes wide. The yarn would have to be that one color for that long before it changed to another color, and this changes quite rapidly. So, and that would not be true of like a micro stripe where you're knitting a sock and there's one stripe for each band. That would really look fairly variegated in the skein. But anyway, I wanted to kind of speak on that topic just a little bit. So it's a beautiful day in Minnesota today. We had such hot temperatures like all of you, and the rains came and the front came through, and we have had 2 glorious days of just more moderate temperatures. It's not nearly as sweltering, it's not quite as humid, and I'm just really enjoying, even the dog wants to go outside and spend some time. But I have a little giveaway today, so I'm going to ask everyone to go over and make a comment on in the Ravelry group. Join the Ravelry group if you haven't joined yet, but I'm going to give away a Knit Cahoots and an iRock Knits pin. I found 2 extra pins in the bottom of a bag just the other week, and I thought, gosh, I should just give those away. So I've got a Knit Cahoots enamel pin and an iRock Knits enamel pin. And I want you to go out onto the thread and just tell me your favorite summer activity, your favorite summer food, your favorite summer recipe, your favorite summer activity for exercise, or what you like to do in the summer, your favorite knitting projects in the summer, something about summer. And I'll draw a couple of winners on the next podcast and send those out to anyone who is interested in having a couple of enamel pins. Maybe you haven't collected them all yet and would like an enamel pin or 2. If you already have one of them or both of them, maybe you could gift them to a friend that you knit with, or somebody who else might be connecting. Oops, there goes the mannequin code. So I just have a little Corey's stories today. 2 weeks ago on Tuesday, so I had recorded on Monday, I woke up to a puppy who could not walk. and it was really scary. He had a giant growth, swollen part on his left front shoulder, and so he could not bear weight. He was keeping his left leg really straight. It wouldn't bend. And I called the vet, and they were booked for the day, and they said, try our sister vet, so in another town over. So I called Excelsior Vet, and they said that they could get him in an hour. And so I got him in the car, which was a huge challenge, and took him to the vet. I really thought it was cancer. It was like a tumor had grown overnight. I was kind of surprised that I hadn't seen it the day before, but we had been busy, and I thought, you know, maybe the swelling was there and I just hadn't noticed, and now it's gotten so much but worse. So anyway, they took x-rays right away. Of course, they think cancer in dogs too. And when she came in, she said there is no lesion. So we think this is an abscess. And Cody has had an abscess once before when he was much younger. He got poked with a stick in the neck, and it got infected, and he grew a big thing under his chin. But it was, you know, the size of a grapefruit. This was the size of a football. It was huge, and but in the skin, so it didn't stick out. It was like the whole thing. Anyway, so they started him on antibiotics, and they tried to aspirate and couldn't get anything from it. And so I have had a dog for 2 weeks who has been on the mend. And we went to a wedding that next weekend in South Dakota, and of course he couldn't go to the daycare or the kennel for the weekend or overnight because he had this owie. And so we had to take him with us, and so we kind of roped off my parents' kitchen when we went to the wedding, and then we came home that night, and he had been ill, so I won't go into the details, but the antibiotic was not sitting well, so he was getting sick. And we got home that night, and I'm staying on the floor petting him, and he's still not doing very well. It's probably 3 days of antibiotic, and he stands up and he irps all over my parents' cream carpet in their family room. All over. He hadn't been sick for the entire day. We're all there. We're sitting there with him. We'd had him in the kitchen, which would have been fine, because that, you know, it's a smooth surface. And my husband had gone to bed. It was late by the time we got home, and he had been traveling, so he was just a walking, you know, zombie. He was so tired. So Stevie and Kylie's boyfriend is Stevie, and they jumped into action. They grabbed a bucket and rags, and I was cleaning it up, and we were shooing him outside, and my parents were just sitting there like, and they had a dog for 20 years. They haven't had a dog in a while, but they had a dog, so we got it cleaned up, and it just really upset his stomach. So then we came home the next morning. We did not stay. We went to the wedding that night. We came home the next morning first thing. We had gone in on Friday, came home on Saturday morning, so we hadn't just stayed, 24 hours, not even. And we got him home, and was just trying to keep him comfortable. And Saturday night, that abscess burst in the mudroom. He was in our mudroom because we were keeping him out of the house, case of illness, and it was like a murder scene. There was blood everywhere. I don't know if he licked it open or if the wound just opened, but I was not feeling well that night. It had been a stressful week. I might love my dog a little too much. And we'd gone to this wedding and come back, and it was hot, and we had taken him with us, and so I was resting, and my husband yells from the mudroom, "Come quick, there's blood everywhere." Hi, yes, bud. And so we scooted him out to the garage, and he cleaned up, and I think that, it starts to feel a lot better once that has happened, right? The swelling goes down. So we just kept him in the garage for quite a while until it got dark. I sat with him on the floor and just kept cold compresses on it to try to keep it from, and then we just had rags and cleaning it up. And then the mosquitoes swarm the dog and I, because the garage door is open, and because it's hot, and it's maybe 9:30 at night, so the sun's going down, and they smell the blood. It was like you see on TV when a bee swarm comes in a cartoon, right? There were mosquitoes, and I'm sitting on the floor. My husband's still cleaning up the mudroom, and I'm screaming at him, Ross, and I'm whipping a towel in the air. I'm whipping this towel around trying to keep the mosquitoes from lighting on me or the dog. Ugh. So we bandaged him up, and then I called, and we got him in and had them look at it, and yeah, it just kept weeping, and everything, came out of it, and that's why then they were pretty certain. So then when I took him back in for his 1 week checkup, they found a puncture wound, 2 actually on his leg. So they think he had been bit by a dog, which is not uncommon, right? Cody is a dog park dog. Cody is a kennel daycare dog. He was there over the 4th. They have a swimming pool. He's ball obsessed. And so if 2 dogs are going after a ball, there was not a malicious attack, is what I'm saying, of Cody. He got bit probably, and it got infected, because and the vet said, that pushes the dirty tooth into the skin, and we probably didn't see it. It probably never bled. It might have, but anyway, he probably cleaned it up. Oh, Cody, you just knocked the camera. So anyway, I know some of you saw my post on Instagram with my poor dog limping through the garage trying to hobble over to his mom. He had a great attitude the whole time. His tail still never stopped wagging, but he was pretty miserable. He did not eat for 4 or 5 days at all. He lost 6 pounds. It was icky and scary. But now he has licked himself a wound on his leg because he's licking, and they did not give us a cone. Cody has not done well with a cone in the past, so those plastic cones, so they recommended that I go get a inflatable one to put around his neck, so I did that. Probably should just put a long sleeve shirt on him now, because he just keeps licking the same spot, so we've had to keep the inflatable cone on longer, a neck collar. It's just a neck collar, and he still get at the lower part of his legs. He's such a stubborn, I think it probably itches, or it's healing. So anyway, I just wanted to tell everybody that he's going to be fine. He's doing well now, and it's never fun to go through that with your pet, because they can't tell you how they're feeling, right? They can't say, Mom, I feel sick to my stomach. Don't give me those antibiotics anymore. Thank you all for listening to another Corey Stories, although this one was a little graphic. I hope I tried to keep it. Okay, I'm going to try standing for the shawl and the sweater this week. We'll see how it goes. It went okay last time, so I'm going to give it a go here. This is the shawl of the week this week. This is the Contrast and Complement shawl, and as you can see from the picture, it is teal on one side and raspberry on the other. So this is a picture of what it looks like. Contrast and Complement. And I'll give you the information here. So it's by Anise and Zane, Andzane, and Zane, and it is adjustable. So there are sizes for all the weights of yarn: DK, sport, fingering, and lace. So you could do this shawl in any of those weights of yarn, and it would be worked out for you. So the pattern is rather lengthy because it has the information for all of those different. It is knit with 2 colors, so you need a little bit more of one color than the other, but not a lot. And then it has a real ruffled border, which also almost always takes up a lot of extra yarn. This is a pattern that has a lot of short rows in it. Here it is held out flat. So it's a triangular shawl, which I think most people would probably wear in bib style in the front, but it's very long, so it wraps around the shoulders quite well and ties in the front, so you get the changing of the guard in the back, the colors in the back, and then you get this long piece of fabric in the front. So see how much longer this has gone all the way around this size 42, 44 mannequin's bust, and then it has this much left over that has completely tied and hung down in the front. but you could certainly wear it with the yarn, you know, with it the other direction. So let me do it that way too for you all. The ruffle on the edge, and then you have this little ruffle on the bottom that changes colors. Right at the front center point, it goes from raspberry to purple. So the short rows are very symmetrical. This one is done in cotton. I don't know that I would do it in cotton again because the short rows tend to show up in the cotton yarn. They're quite distinct. I might use a different short row technique. This was knit as a sample for a local yarn store, but I paid the sample knitter and purchased the yarn, so I then got it back when they were done using it as a sample in the shop. Thinking about teaching it as a class, and then they didn't, so I got the actual shawl back to wear. It takes 400 to 440 yards of DK, all the way up to 900 or 820 yards of lace weight. So it is a large shawl. It's, you know, several skeins. In the fingering weight version, it's 650, so you need several skeins of or leftovers, like a 400 yard skein and then a half a skein of leftover, or something like that. So, but very pretty, and I think so interesting to have it where it changed color from one side to the next. So that's the contrast and complement. Now I'll grab the sweater. I want to briefly recommend a class on the internet by Carol Feller. She did a short row class on Craftsy that is now on the Blueprint platform, and it's excellent. If you would like to learn or know more about short rows, and especially in reference to this shawl and possibly using a different short row, I think it's really well worth the money. She goes through several different short row techniques, and then also talks about why you would use certain applications of different short rows. So the German short row, the Japanese short row. She goes through those, the wrap and turn. And I think I've briefly mentioned it before, but in reference to that particular shawl, I thought I should just mention it again. This is the sweater of the week, and it's not a sweater. It is called the Koigu Crossover Rib Top, and it was only available on Pattern Fish, and it's a Sally Melville pattern, and Sally's a pretty prolific designer. So when Pattern Fish closed, you're no longer able to get your patterns off Pattern Fish anymore. I reached out to Sally because I used this top in my class and asked her if she would be moving it over to Ravelry from Pattern Fish, and she said yes. She will just get on her computer and get that done. So it is not available right now on Ravelry, but it shall be shortly. The pattern was available for $6, so I'm assuming she'll keep it at that. And it's a fingering weight vest that has this crossover front. So I will hold up the pattern. There it is on a really trim person with nothing on the sleeves, you know, no shirt underneath it, and probably just a little cami. So it's knit on the bias, so you cast on and you knit one piece on the bias, so you're decreasing on one side and increasing on the other side, and then you knit a second piece, and then you knit a rib straight up the back. So this entire piece is ribbed. If you hate knitting ribbing, you're not going to want to knit this. But this is separate, and it's got an angled bottom, and I'm going to put a picture in here so you can all see it better. And I wear it with what I would call an artist's shirt underneath it. So a white collared shirt with big sleeves, and then enough shirt to hang out the bottom. Does that make sense? So that the silhouette of the sweater is tight and fitted, but the shirt helps with the proportion so that it provides more of a bulky item that you have underneath it, as opposed to just having this very trim fit little vest kind of underneath it. So flattering. If you go in at all at the waist, which I do a little bit, and so it can be really flattering, especially if your bust is a little bit larger. But it's probably more traditionally worn without anything underneath it, just as an open front shirt. And this one's longer. So the front, where's the front? Right there, where you can see it hangs down further and crosses over. So she doesn't have, here is the other 3 pictures. They're all kind of above the waist. Yeah, I think there are probably maybe 45 or so patterns out there on Ravelry that have been knit of this. I use the Koigu sock weight yarn. It is, like I said, it's available in small, medium, and large sizes, 34, 45, and 50. And it has just a ton of stretch because it's all ribbed. So it can really, those sizes could fit a larger size person in that. So that's today's sweater. Okay, I'm just gonna finish up here by saying that Kylie and I sat down and did a little Q&A for about a half an hour today, and I was going to put that into the middle of the podcast. But that's gonna make the podcast really long today, so I'm gonna put it up as a separate video. It will come up, right after this one. So this will be episode 24, and then I will put up that Q&A. I had a list of probably 30 questions that different podcasters have been asking their husbands, and when I brought it up to my husband, Kylie happened to be sitting there, and Ross was not really willing, and so Kylie said, I'll do it with you, Mom. I'll answer the questions. And so she did. She sat down with me to do that today. So I kind of hustled through the shawl and the sweater of the day to shorten up the podcast a little bit, and now I'm going to split it into 2 parts. I think it'll just be better that way. I had a question from Rose about men's knitting patterns and men's raglan sleeved knitting patterns, and I did look up on Brooklyn Tweed some patterns for her and answered that question. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask my friend Matt if he would be a guest on the podcast to talk about men's knitting sweater patterns. So Matt, this is going to be a surprise to you, I think. But then we can do a little talk on a couple of the sweaters that I've knit for my dad and my husband, as well as sweaters that Matt has really enjoyed knitting. Matt is a prolific, prolific men's sweater knitter in the last 2 or 3 years, and he's got some great sweaters. So I'll ask him maybe to bring a couple of those, and he and I can sit down and do that in the next couple of weeks, if he's willing. If he's not, I'll have to delete this out of here. So anyway, Kylie and I did a whole lot of talking about knitting, and that'll be up in a podcast to come here. I'll get that edited today. Thank you to all of those who've reached out and written comments or asked me questions, or contributed to the audiobook thread, or whatever you do to be a part of my community here. I am just thrilled that this has just been so much fun for me, and I am glad that you are all my friends. So until next time, keep it colorful and waddle on.